The warning was delivered quietly, without witnesses, and without room for misunderstanding. There was no argument leading up to it, no raised voices, no emotional build-up. Caitriona Balfe spoke calmly, choosing each word with precision. The sentence was short, controlled, and unmistakably firm. Never mention me. Or Sam. It was not a request, and it was not framed as a conversation. What made the moment unsettling was how final it sounded. There was no explanation offered afterward, no context to soften the message. The silence that followed stretched long enough to make its meaning clear. Tony McGill did not ask why, did not challenge the boundary, and did not attempt to clarify what had just been drawn between them. This was not how casual boundaries are set. For years, their connection had existed in a space that avoided conflict but never fully closed itself off. They shared history, overlap, and a public past that had never been openly dissected. That history made the warning feel less like emotional fallout and more like strategic containment. The inclusion of Sam Heughan's name changed everything. Caitriona did not say, "me," then pause. She added Sam immediately, without hesitation, as if the two names belonged together in that sentence. That detail alone suggested the warning was not about personal discomfort, but about protection. Protection from what remained unspoken. Those familiar with Caitriona's approach to public life described her as deliberate, not reactive. She rarely moved without reason and almost never issued ultimatums. For her to draw such a clear line meant something had shifted beyond tolerance. The timing of the warning raised questions. It did not follow a public incident or a media flare-up. No rumors had surfaced that week, no interviews had crossed a line. The lack of an obvious trigger made the warning feel preemptive, as if she was responding to something that hadn't happened yet, but might. And that is what made it dangerous. Preemptive silence is rarely about the past. It is about anticipating the damage a single sentence could cause if spoken at the wrong time. Caitriona understood how fragile narratives can be once they escape private control. Tony's reaction spoke volumes. He didn't protest or attempt to negotiate the boundary. Instead, he accepted it, recognizing that the cost of ignoring it would be higher than the cost of compliance. When someone issues a warning that specific, it usually means they are prepared to enforce it. After that moment, patterns began to shift. Names that once surfaced casually in conversation disappeared entirely. References were avoided, stories left unfinished, questions redirected. The silence wasn't loud enough to draw attention, but it was consistent enough to feel intentional. Observers later noticed how clean the separation became. There were no public acknowledgments, no subtle nods, no nostalgic remarks. It was as if entire chapters had been sealed off, not erased, but locked. That kind of restraint requires discipline and motivation. The warning was not about ownership. Caitriona did not attempt to control narratives or rewrite history. She did not ask for lies or denials. She asked for absence. And absence, in the right context, can be more powerful than any statement. What unsettled those who learned about the warning was its scope. It wasn't limited to a single topic or moment. It applied broadly, without expiration or condition. That suggested the risk was ongoing, not resolved. And then there was Sam. He was not present when the warning was delivered, but his name anchored it. That implied coordination, or at least understanding. Caitriona was not acting independently. She was protecting something shared. Whether that something was emotional, reputational, or deeply personal remained unclear. But the warning achieved its purpose. Nothing was said, nothing slipped, nothing leaked. The silence held, not because it was enforced publicly, but because it was respected privately. And in a world where silence is rare and exposure constant, that kind of restraint usually signals one thing. The truth was closer than anyone realized, and it needed to stay exactly where it was. The silence that followed the warning did not feel empty. It felt deliberate, maintained with care and mutual understanding. Tony McGill adjusted his behavior immediately, avoiding not only public mentions but private references as well. When silence is that thorough, it usually reflects respect, or awareness of consequences. What became clear over time was that the warning was not emotional. It was logistical, almost strategic, as if Caitriona had mapped out potential outcomes and chosen the only option that prevented escalation. This was not about cutting ties or reopening old wounds. It was about controlling the future by limiting what could be said in the present. Behind the scenes, the absence of noise drew attention of its own. Journalists noticed a sudden lack of overlap, a missing trail where one had existed before. Questions were asked quietly, then abandoned just as quickly. Without quotes, hints, or contradictions, speculation had nothing to attach itself to. Caitriona's public demeanor did not change. She remained composed, professional, and focused, offering no visible signs of strain. That consistency reinforced the idea that the warning was not a reaction to chaos, but a move to prevent it. People who act out of fear rarely appear this steady. Sam Heughan's role remained unspoken, yet unmistakable. He did not comment, clarify, or distance himself from the boundary that had been set. His silence aligned perfectly with Caitriona's actions, suggesting agreement rather than surprise. When two people maintain the same line without coordination on record, it usually means the conversation happened elsewhere. The most revealing aspect was what never surfaced. No counterstatements appeared, no anonymous sources contradicted the silence. In an industry where narratives leak easily, the absence of friction indicated cooperation, not suppression. Those closest to the situation described it as containment, not secrecy. The goal was not to erase history, but to prevent it from being repurposed. Words, once released, can be reshaped, misunderstood, and weaponized. Caitriona's warning acknowledged that risk and shut it down before it began. Over time, the warning lost its edge and became a rule. Not because it was enforced repeatedly, but because it didn't need to be. Tony respected it, Sam honored it, and Caitriona never revisited it. Boundaries that hold without reinforcement tend to be the strongest ones. Fans interpreted the silence in different ways. Some saw it as evidence of unresolved tension, others as proof of something deeply protected. But without confirmation or denial, opinions remained just that, opinions. The lack of information prevented the story from growing teeth. What remained was intention. Caitriona did not ask for understanding, and she did not seek approval. She made a decision based on what needed protection, not what would be easiest to explain. In doing so, she shifted the dynamic entirely. The warning had one lasting effect. It removed access, not just to names or stories, but to speculation itself. By cutting off the source before it could speak, Caitriona ensured that whatever mattered most would remain untouched. In the end, nothing exploded. No revelations followed, no dramatic fallout occurred, and no public reckoning arrived. The story didn't end because it was disproven. It ended because silence, when chosen deliberately, can be more effective than any denial. Sometimes the strongest statement is not what is said next. It is what never gets said at all, and that silence continues to do its work quietly. Without headlines or confrontations, it has kept certain truths suspended, untouched by interpretation. In a world addicted to exposure, restraint becomes its own kind of power. And sometimes, the clearest warning is not the words spoken, but the story that never follows.